The huge space station called Harmony Prime floated in the darkness between stars. Inside its main hall, hundreds of alien beings sat in curved rows of seats. Their eyes, tentacles, and other strange body parts all turned toward the center of the room. Today was special. Today, they would watch the humans fail. Captain Lee Taman stood alone in the middle of the hall. He wore his blue Earth Defense Corps uniform with pride. His black hair was cut short and neat. His dark eyes looked calm, but inside he felt nervous. Around him, aliens whispered in languages that sounded like music, clicks, or growling sounds. The Vorthan Empire had ruled this part of space for 3,000 years. They were tall, thin beings with purple skin and 4 arms. Their leader, High Architect Velthanis, stepped forward. His voice was deep and cold when he spoke. "Humans think they are smart," Velthanis said. His words echoed in the hall. "They want to join our Galactic Council, but first, they must prove they deserve it." Behind the alien leader, a massive wall began to glow. Pictures appeared showing a giant maze that looked like it went on forever. The walls moved and changed shape as they watched. Strange lights pulsed through the corridors like a heartbeat. "This is the Mindbreaker Maze," Velthanis continued. "For 3,000 years, we have used it to test the greatest minds in the galaxy. No being has ever escaped in less than 6 cycles. Most never escape at all. Taman knew that 6 cycles meant about 144 Earth hours. That was 6 full days. He also knew that many beings who entered the maze went crazy before they died of thirst and hunger. In the observation deck above, Dr. Park Minji watched with worry in her eyes. She was Earth's chief expert on alien minds. Her long black hair was tied back in a simple ponytail. Next to her sat Engineer Kim Woo-jin, a young man with thick glasses who understood machines better than most people. Communications Officer Choi Hana sat on his other side. She had short hair and quick, smart eyes. "This is not good," Minji whispered to her friends. "The maze is designed to drive people insane. It reads your mind and uses your fears against you." Woo-jin adjusted his glasses nervously. "The walls can move in ways that should not be possible. The maze uses technology we do not understand yet." Hana listened to the alien voices around them through her translation device. "They are betting on how long Taman will last," she said quietly. "Most think he will break down in the first hour." Down in the main hall, other alien species looked at Taman with different feelings. The crystalline collective, beings made of living glass, thought humans might be interesting. The Aquatic Federation, who lived underwater on their home worlds, seemed curious. But the Vorthons looked sure that humanity would fail today. "The maze is alive," Velthanis explained with a cruel smile. "It learns from every being that enters. It becomes smarter and more deadly with each test. It knows how your species thinks before you even step inside." The High Architect walked closer to Taman. "Your people are young and simple. You have only just learned to travel between stars. What makes you think you can solve a puzzle that has defeated civilizations millions of years old? Taman stood straight and looked the alien in the eyes. Maybe being young is not always a bad thing, he said. Maybe old ways are not always the best ways. The aliens in the hall made sounds that might have been laughter or anger. It was hard to tell the difference with so many species present. Very well, Velthanis said. The rules are simple. Enter the maze and find your way out. If you succeed, humanity joins the council. If you fail... He did not finish the sentence, but everyone understood. Failed beings did not come back out. Doorway opened in the air near Taman. It looked like a window made of water, but the water stood up by itself. Through it he could see the start of the maze. The walls were dark metal with strange symbols that glowed blue and green. The maze will test your body, your mind, and your spirit, Velthanis warned. It will show you things that are not real. It will make you hear voices of people you love, calling for help. It will try to make you give up hope. Taman nodded. He had trained for this day for 2 years. The Earth government had chosen him because he was smart, strong, and did not give up easily. He had been a soldier, an explorer, and a problem solver his whole life. Are there any other rules? Taman asked. Only one, Velthanis replied. Once you enter, you cannot leave the same way. You must find the true exit, up in the observation deck. Minji grabbed Wu Jin's arm. That is new information, she said. He cannot just turn around and come back. Hana checked her equipment. I have a communication link with the captain. We can talk to him while he is inside, but we cannot help him directly. The hall became quiet. Hundreds of alien eyes watched as Taman walked toward the glowing doorway. His footsteps echoed in the silence. He stopped at the edge of the portal and looked back at his friends. For Earth, he said simply. Then he stepped through. The portal closed behind him with a sound like breaking glass. On the viewing screens, around the hall, they could see Taman standing in a dark corridor. The walls around him were covered in symbols that moved and changed. The air itself seemed to shimmer with strange energy. Time begins now, Velthanis announced. Let us see how long this human lasts. The aliens settled back in their seats. Most expected to be here for many hours, maybe even days. They had brought food and drinks. Some had even brought sleeping mats. In the observation deck, Minji, Wu Jin, and Hana watched the screens with intense focus. They could see their friend, but they felt helpless. Everything now depended on Taman alone. The maze is already starting to work on him, Minji said. She pointed to the screen where the walls around Taman were beginning to glow brighter. It is reading his mind, learning his patterns. On the screen, Taman began to walk down the corridor. Behind him, the passage sealed itself shut. New corridors opened to his left and right. The maze was alive, and it was hungry for another victim. But Taman did not look worried. Instead, he looked curious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. It was not a map or a computer. It was just a simple timer. He pressed a button, and the timer began counting. 30 minutes appeared on the small screen. What is he doing? Wu Jin asked. On the main floor, Velthanis laughed. The human thinks he can solve our maze in 30 minutes. How amusing. Even our greatest architects need days to understand its basic structure. But Taman was not trying to understand the maze the way others had. He was looking at it in a completely different way. And that difference would change everything. Taman found himself standing in a corridor that hurt his eyes to look at. The walls curved in directions that should not exist. Up and down seemed to change places every few seconds. The metal walls were covered in symbols that moved like living things, crawling across the surface in patterns that made his head spin. The air tasted strange, like metal and electricity. Every breath felt thick and heavy. Behind him, the entrance had vanished completely. There was only solid wall where the portal had been moments before. The maze had trapped him inside, just as it had trapped thousands of others over the centuries. 3 passages opened in front of him. One went straight ahead into darkness. Another curved to the left, glowing with red light. The third twisted to the right, filled with blue fog that moved like it was alive. Each passage looked equally dangerous. Taman took a step forward, and the maze immediately responded. The floor beneath his feet began to vibrate. A low humming sound filled the air, like the maze was thinking. The symbols on the walls glowed brighter and moved faster. In the observation deck, Minji watched the screens with growing concern. "The maze is scanning him," she said to Wujin and Hana. "Look at those symbol patterns. They are measuring his heart rate, his brain activity, even his fear levels." On the main floor, the alien spectators watched with interest. Most had seen this before. The maze always started the same way, by learning about its victim. Then it would begin its real work. Velthanis spoke to the gathered aliens. "Watch carefully. This is when the maze begins to understand the human mind. Soon it will know his weaknesses, his fears, his deepest secrets." But Taman was not behaving like other beings who had entered the maze. Instead of looking confused or afraid, he was studying the walls with curiosity. He reached out and touched one of the moving symbols. It felt warm and seemed to pulse with life. "Interesting," he said out loud. He knew his friends could hear him through the communication link. "This is not just a maze. It is more like a computer program." Hana's voice came through his earpiece, clear and calm. "We can see you on the screens, Captain. The aliens are watching everything you do." Taman nodded and began walking down the straight corridor. As soon as he moved, the maze began its psychological attack. The walls started to close in slowly, trying to make him feel trapped and helpless. The ceiling lowered bit by bit, forcing him to duck his head. Most beings would panic at this point. The feeling of being crushed was one of the most basic fears in the galaxy. But Taman had trained in tight spaces. He had crawled through damaged spaceships and underground tunnels during his military service. This felt familiar, not frightening. "The walls are moving to crush me," he reported calmly. "But they are moving in a pattern. It is not random." The maze seemed surprised by his lack of fear. The walls stopped closing and instead began to show him images. Pictures appeared on the metal surfaces. His childhood home on Earth, his parents, his sister who had died in a space accident 5 years ago. "Taman!" came a voice that sounded exactly like his dead sister. "Help me! I am lost! I am scared! Please come find me!" This was the maze's second weapon, false hope and guilt. It used the voices of loved ones to make beings run deeper into the labyrinth, chasing ghosts that did not exist. In the observation deck, Minji felt sick. "That is cruel, even for the Vorthans," she whispered, using the voice of his dead sister. But Taman just smiled sadly. "Hello, June," he said to the image of his sister. "You look beautiful, just like I remember. But you are not real, and I have work to do." He kept walking, leaving the false image behind. The maze tried again, showing him pictures of Earth under attack, of his friends being hurt, of everything he cared about being destroyed. Each image was designed to make him panic, to make him run without thinking. "Very impressive," Taman said as he walked. "But you are just showing me my own memories. You cannot create anything new. That means you are limited." The alien spectators began to murmur among themselves. Most beings who entered the maze were crying or screaming by now. This human seemed almost bored by the psychological attacks. Velthanis frowned. "The maze is just getting started," he announced. "Wait until it begins the real tests." As if responding to his words, the corridor around Taman suddenly changed. The straight path became a spiral that twisted in impossible directions. Gravity shifted, making him feel like he was walking on the walls or ceiling. The maze was trying to confuse his sense of direction. "Now this is more interesting," Taman said. He stopped walking and looked around carefully. "Wujin, are you seeing this?" "Yes, Captain," came the engineer's voice. "The maze is using some kind of gravity manipulation technology, but look at the energy patterns on your walls." Taman examined the symbols more closely. They were not just random decorations. They were data streams, information flowing through the maze's systems like blood through veins. "The maze is not just testing me," Taman realized. "It is learning from me. Every step I take, every decision I make, it is recording and analyzing." He began to walk again, but now he was watching the symbols instead of the path. The maze created new obstacles. Holes opened in the floor, walls shot out spikes, ceiling panels tried to fall on him. But Taman dodged them all easily, his attention focused on the data patterns flowing around him. "Captain," Hana said through the communication link, "your timer shows 10 minutes have passed." "Good," Taman replied. "I am starting to understand how this system works." The maze seemed to sense that something was wrong. It began to attack more aggressively. The corridor filled with poisonous gas. Flames shot from the walls. The floor became slippery ice, but none of it worked. Taman moved through each trap, like he had seen them coming. "How is he doing that?" one of the alien spectators asked. "He is reading the maze's own control signals," Wujin explained to his friends in the observation deck. "Look at how he moves just before each trap activates. He is seeing the commands in the symbol patterns. Velthanis stood up from his seat, anger clear on his purple face. That is impossible. The maze's control systems are protected by the most advanced encryption in the galaxy. But Taman was not trying to hack the maze's encryption. He was doing something much simpler and much more dangerous. He was treating the maze like a wild animal instead of a computer. And like any animal, it had habits and patterns that could be learned. The maze thinks like a predator, he said to his friends. It hunts by learning its prey's behavior, but that means it has to show its own behavior too. He stopped walking and looked up at the ceiling for the first time. Above him, the corridor continued upward, twisted and curved like the trunk of a massive tree. Other passages branched off in all directions, creating a three-dimensional web of paths. "Minji," he said, "what do the records say about how other species tried to solve this maze?" "They all tried to map it from ground level," she replied. "They walked through the passages and tried to remember every turn." "That is what I thought," Taman said. He pulled off his uniform jacket and tied it around his waist. "Tell me, do any of the species in the Galactic Council have good climbing abilities?" There was silence in the observation deck as his friends understood what he was planning. "Captain," Wu Jin said slowly, "you are not seriously thinking of climbing the walls?" Taman finished. "Yes, I am. If everyone else has tried to solve this maze by walking through it, maybe it is time to try a different approach." He reached up and grabbed one of the metal pipes that ran along the wall. The pipe felt solid and strong. The maze had never needed to defend against climbers before. Taman began to pull himself up the wall. Taman pulled himself up the wall with steady, practiced movements. His military training had included climbing in zero gravity, scaling damaged ships, and moving through three-dimensional battle zones. The maze walls were rough metal with plenty of handholds. For him, this was easier than many climbs he had done before. The alien spectators watched in complete silence. Never in 3,000 years had anyone tried to climb the maze walls. The very idea seemed impossible to them. Most species in the galaxy were either too heavy, had the wrong body shape, or simply never thought to look up. "What is the human doing?" asked a representative from the Crystalline Collective. Their glass-like bodies were beautiful, but fragile. Climbing was not something they could ever attempt. "He appears to be ascending vertically," replied a member of the Aquatic Federation. "Their species lived underwater and moved by swimming. The concept of climbing was as foreign to them as breathing water was to humans." Velthanis stared at the screens with growing alarm. "This is against the rules," he declared loudly. "The maze must be solved by proper navigation, not by climbing like some primitive animal." But the Council Arbiter, an ancient being whose species had helped create the galactic laws, shook his head slowly. "No rules were broken," he said in a voice like distant thunder. "You said only that he must find the exit. You did not say how." As Taman climbed higher, the maze began to respond in ways it never had before. The walls started to vibrate, trying to shake him loose. Spikes shot out from the surface, but Taman was already moving to his next handhold before they could reach him. "The system is confused," he said into his communication device. "It was never programmed to deal with vertical movement. Look at the symbol patterns around me." In the observation deck, Wu Jin studied the screens carefully. The flowing data streams that covered the maze walls were flickering and changing rapidly. "You are right, Captain. The maze is trying to adapt, but its responses are delayed and uncertain." Minji leaned forward in her seat. "The psychological attacks have stopped too. The maze cannot figure out how to apply fear and confusion to someone who is not following the expected path." As Taman climbed higher, he began to see the maze from a completely new angle. What had looked like an endless, impossible labyrinth from ground level was actually a complex but understandable structure from above. The passages formed patterns. The dead ends and loops were arranged in logical groups. "Hana, start recording. Everything I describe," he said. "The maze is not random at all. It is built like a computer program with subroutines and decision trees." He reached a junction where several passages met in a large open space. From his position on the wall, he could see down multiple corridors at once. The maze stretched out, below him like a vast three-dimensional map. "I can see 5 major sections from here," Taman reported. "Each section has a different type of challenge. There is a section with moving walls, another with gravity tricks, one with false images, one with physical traps, and a central area that looks like it controls everything else." The alien spectators were becoming more agitated with each word. Some species had spent decades studying the maze from the outside, trying to understand its structure. This human was mapping it in real time just by climbing up and looking around. "Impossible," muttered one of the Vorthon architects. "The maze has 17 different dimensional layers. It cannot be mapped from simple visual observation." But Taman was not just looking with his eyes. His military training had taught him to read battlefield layouts quickly. He could see the flow of energy through the walls, the way the data streams connected different sections, and the logical structure hidden beneath the chaos. "Wu Jin," he said, "I need you to start building a 3-dimensional map based on my descriptions. This maze is not alive. It is a very sophisticated computer program disguised as a labyrinth." The engineer's fingers flew over his portable computer. "Map started, Captain. Keep giving me coordinates and descriptions." As Taman moved along the wall toward the next section, the maze tried new tactics to stop him. The wall surface became smooth and slippery, but Taman had climbing claws in his equipment kit, small metal tools that soldiers used for emergency climbing. He attached them to his hands and feet and kept moving. The maze tried making the walls too hot to touch. Taman's uniform included thermal protection that could handle the heat of a damaged engine room. The temperature was uncomfortable, but not dangerous. 15 minutes on the timer," Hana announced. "Captain, you have covered more distance in 15 minutes than most beings cover in 15 hours. From his new position, Taman could see even more of the maze structure. "The central section is definitely the control center," he said. "All the data streams flow toward it. If I can reach that area, I think I can understand how the whole system works." In the main hall, Velthanis was pacing back and forth. Other Vorthan officials whispered urgently among themselves. Their greatest secret, their ultimate test of intelligence, was being unraveled by a human who refused to follow the rules they had assumed everyone would follow. "High Architect," one of the officials said quietly, "should we stop the test? The human is learning too much about our systems." "We cannot stop it now," Velthanis replied through gritted teeth. "Too many species are watching. If we interfere, they will know we are afraid of what he might discover." But Velthanis was right to be afraid. Taman was discovering things about the maze that even its creators had forgotten. From his high vantage point, he could see that the maze was not just testing the beings who entered it, it was also recording everything about them. "This is not just a test," Taman said grimly. "This is a data collection system. Every species that has ever entered this maze has had their mental patterns, problem-solving methods, and psychological profiles recorded and stored." The implications hit his friends immediately. "That is how the Vorthans have stayed ahead of everyone else technologically," Minji said. "They have been stealing the intellectual property of every species that takes their test." Wujin's computer chimed softly. "Captain, I have been analyzing the energy patterns you described. The maze is not just recording data, it is transmitting it to external systems. The Vorthons have been building a database of galactic intelligence for 3,000 years. The alien spectators began to understand what the humans were discovering. Angry voices rose from different sections of the viewing area. Species that had failed the maze test decades or centuries ago realized they had been robbed of their knowledge and ideas. But Taman was not finished yet. He had reached the outer edge of the central section, and what he saw there made him stop climbing. "Friends," he said quietly, "I think I know why no one has ever escaped this maze in less than 6 cycles. It is not because the maze is too difficult to solve. It is because the maze has been programmed never to let anyone escape quickly." He looked down at a series of symbols that were different from all the others. These symbols were not flowing data streams. They were locks, security programs designed to keep the maze's exits sealed until enough time had passed to complete the data collection process. "The maze is cheating," Taman said. "It prevents escape until it has stolen everything it can from the person inside." Now he understood why his 30-minute timer was so important. He was not just trying to solve the maze quickly for the sake of impressing the aliens. He was trying to escape before the maze could finish stealing humanity's intellectual secrets. 20 minutes left, he said, checking his timer. Time to visit the control center. Taman began his descent into the central section of the maze. Unlike the outer passages, this area was built vertically, like the inside of a massive tower. Platforms and walkways stretched across empty space, connected by bridges that glowed, with the same symbol patterns he had been following. The maze seemed to realize that its normal tactics were not working. It began to throw everything it had at the climbing human. The walls became covered in electricity. Taman used his climbing claws to ground himself safely. Poisonous gas filled the air. His uniform included a basic breathing filter that gave him enough protection to keep moving. "The system is getting desperate," he reported to his friends. "It is using attacks that could kill me instead of just testing me." In the observation deck, Minji watched with growing alarm. "Captain, be careful. The maze was never designed to deal with someone who could reach the central systems. It might have defensive measures that could be lethal." But Taman had faced worse dangers during his military service. He had survived reactor failures, hostile alien encounters, and ship battles in deep space. A computer program, no matter how sophisticated, was still just a machine following its programming. As he climbed down toward the control center, Taman began to see the true structure of the maze system. The central tower was filled with massive processing units, data storage devices, and control panels covered in symbols that changed constantly. It looked like the brain of a giant computer. "Wu Jin," he said, "you need to see this. The maze is not just one program. It is an entire artificial intelligence system designed to study and catalog different types of thinking." The engineer studied, the images being transmitted from Taman's position. "Those processing units are incredibly advanced," he said. "They must contain the collected intelligence data from thousands of species over 3 millennia. In the main hall, the alien spectators were in an uproar. Representatives from dozens of species were demanding answers from the Vorthon delegation. They had realized that their failed maze attempts had resulted in their civilization's knowledge being stolen and used against them. "This is an outrage," declared the ambassador from the Silicon Consortium. "Our people spent 50 years trying to solve that maze. You stole our quantum mathematics and used them to build better computers than us. Our agricultural techniques," said the representative from the Botanical Union. "That is how you learn to grow food in space without soil or water." Velthanis tried to maintain control. "The maze is a legitimate test," he insisted. "Any knowledge gained is fairly earned through superior intelligence." But his words sounded hollow now that the truth was being revealed. The Vorthon Empire had built its technological superiority not through their own intelligence, but by stealing the best ideas from every species that challenged their maze. Meanwhile, Taman had reached the first platform in the central tower. The control systems here were unlike anything he had seen before. The symbols moved in three-dimensional patterns, creating complex equations and data structures in the air above the panels. "This is beautiful," he said with genuine admiration. "Whoever designed this system was a genius. But they used their genius for theft instead of creation." He began to study the control patterns, looking for the systems that managed the maze's locks and barriers. His military training included basic computer systems, but this was far more advanced than anything Earth had built. "Hana," he said, "I need you to record everything I am about to do. If I can figure out how these controls work, we might be able to free everyone who is still trapped in here." "Still trapped?" Minji asked. "What do you mean?" Tamin pointed to a series of status displays around the control center. "Look at these screens. There are dozens of life signs scattered throughout the maze. People from different species who entered the test and never found their way out. They are still alive, still wandering in the outer sections." The implications horrified everyone listening. The maze was not just a test that some people failed. It was a prison that kept its victims alive while it slowly extracted every piece of knowledge from their minds. That is inhuman, Hana whispered. It is worse than inhuman, Taman replied grimly. It is deliberately evil. He began to examine the control systems more carefully. The symbols were a form of programming language, but unlike any computer code he had seen before, it was more like music or poetry, with flowing patterns that represented complex ideas and commands. Woojin, can you help me understand this code? It is not like our programming languages. The engineer studied the transmitted images. It appears to be a consciousness-based programming system, he said slowly. The code responds to thought patterns instead of typed commands. That is why only highly intelligent beings can operate it. Taman nodded. That explained why the maze was so effective at studying different types of intelligence. It was designed to interact directly with conscious minds. He placed his hands on one of the control panels and tried to focus his thoughts on the symbols. Immediately, the patterns began to respond. Information flowed through his mind. The history of the maze, the profiles of thousands of tested species, the stolen knowledge that had built the Vorthon Empire. I can access the system, he said, his voice tight with concentration. But there is so much information here. I need to find the right controls quickly. 18 minutes remaining, Hana announced. Taman forced himself to focus on the immediate problem. He needed to find the exit controls and the security locks that kept the maze sealed. The consciousness-based interface made it possible to search through vast amounts of data very quickly, but it also threatened to overwhelm his mind with information. He found the first set of controls, the systems that manage the maze's physical structure. With careful thought commands, he began to map the locations of all the exits and barriers. I found them, he said. There are 12 different exit points, scattered throughout the maze. But they are all locked by security programs that only activate after the data collection process is complete. In the main hall, Velthanis realized what was happening. Stop him, he shouted to his assistants. He is accessing classified systems. But there was nothing they could do. The maze was designed to be completely isolated during tests. No outside interference was possible until the test was completed. Taman found the second set of controls, the data collection systems. These were the programs that scanned the minds of maze subjects and extracted their knowledge. The amount of stolen information was staggering. Friends, he said quietly, I think I can do more than just escape. I think I can shut down this entire system and free everyone who is trapped inside. He began to work with the consciousness-based controls, learning how to give the complex thought commands that would unlock the maze's security systems. It was like learning to speak a new language in minutes, but his military training had taught him to adapt quickly to new situations. Be careful, Captain, Minji warned. If you make a mistake with those controls, you could trap yourself permanently. I know, Taman replied. But I cannot leave those other people in here, and I cannot let the Vorthans keep using this system to steal from other species. He found the master control system, the core program that managed everything else. With this, he could unlock all the exits, free all the trapped beings, and shut down the data collection systems permanently. But first, he had one more discovery to make. Deep in the system's memory, he found the original purpose of the maze. It had not been built as a test at all. It had been designed as a prison for the Vorthan's enemies, a way to capture and study opposing civilizations without them realizing it. The maze was never about testing intelligence, he said. It was always about stealing it. From his position at the master control system, Taman could see the entire maze laid out like a three-dimensional map in his mind. The consciousness-based interface allowed him to perceive the structure in ways that normal vision could never show. Every passage, every trap, every hidden system was revealed to him in perfect detail. "Wu Jin, Hana, Minji," he said, "I am going to transmit the complete maze structure to you. Record everything. The galaxy needs to know exactly how this system works." Through the mind-link interface, Taman began sharing what he could see. The maze was built in 7 distinct layers, each designed to test and steal different types of knowledge. The outer layer tested basic problem-solving skills. The second layer examined memory and pattern recognition. The third focused on creative thinking and adaptation. The fourth layer, Taman continued, tests leadership abilities and social cooperation. The fifth examines technological understanding. The sixth layer studies emotional intelligence and psychological stability. "What about the seventh layer?" Minji asked. "The seventh layer is the core. It extracts the deepest knowledge, the fundamental principles of how each species thinks and learns. This is where the Vorthans steal the intellectual foundations of entire civilizations." As he explored the system deeper, Taman discovered something even more disturbing. The maze did not just steal knowledge from individual beings. It combined the stolen information from different species to create hybrid technologies and ideas that no single civilization could have developed alone. "They have been mixing and matching stolen concepts for 3,000 years, he said. "Vorthan. Innovations are actually combinations of ideas taken from hundreds of different species." In the observation deck, Wu Jin was rapidly building a complete map of the maze based on Taman's descriptions. The three-dimensional structure that appeared on his computer screen was incredibly complex, but it followed logical patterns once you understood the underlying design. "Captain," he said, "I can see weak points in the system. There are backup control nodes scattered throughout the maze. If you can access 3 or 4 of them, you should be able to override the main security locks." Hana was monitoring the alien. Communications in the main hall. "The Vorthans are getting very nervous," she reported. "They are discussing whether to activate emergency shutdown procedures." "Can they do that?" Taman asked. "Not while you are connected to the master controls," Minji replied. "The maze's own security systems prevent external interference during active tests. But if you disconnect from the system, they might be able to lock it down permanently." Taman realized he was in a race against time. He needed to complete his mission before the Vorthans found a way to stop him. Using the consciousness-based interface, he began accessing the backup control nodes that Wu Jin had identified. The first node was located in the section with moving walls. Through the control system, Taman could observe the dozens of beings still trapped throughout the maze. Some had been wandering the passages for decades, kept alive by the maze's life support systems, while their minds were slowly drained of knowledge. "There is a crystalline collective member who has been trapped for 47 years, Taman said grimly, "and an aquatic Federation explorer who entered 62 years ago. The maze has been feeding them and keeping them healthy while it steals everything they know." He activated the first backup node and immediately felt the system's security protocols begin to weaken. The maze's artificial intelligence recognized what was happening and began to fight back. "Warning," came a voice that spoke directly into Taman's mind through the interface. "Unauthorized access detected, initiating protective measures." The control systems around him began to glow brighter. The maze was trying to overload the consciousness interface and knock him unconscious before he could complete his work. 15 minutes left," Hana announced. Taman gritted his teeth and pushed deeper into the system. The mental pressure was intense, like trying to hold a conversation while someone screamed in his ears. But his military training had prepared him for mental stress and information overload. He reached the second backup node located in the gravity manipulation section. As he activated it, the maze's defensive measures intensified. The symbols around him began flashing in patterns designed to cause seizures and disorientation. "Captain, your vital signs are showing stress," Minji warned. "The system is trying to damage your mind." "I know," Taman replied through gritted teeth. "But I am almost through their defenses." Through the control interface, he could see the maze's artificial intelligence working frantically to protect itself. It was like watching a computer virus trying to delete evidence of its own crimes. The AI knew that if Taman succeeded, 3,000 years of stolen knowledge would be exposed. Takta, third backup node, was in the psychological testing section. When Taman accessed it, the maze tried a different approach. Instead of attacking his mind directly, it began showing him false information about his friends. "Your companions have abandoned you," the AI whispered in his thoughts. "They are working with the Vorthons now. You are alone." But Taman could hear his friends' voices clearly through his communication device. The maze's lies were too obvious to be effective. "The fourth node is in the technology testing section," Wu Jin announced. "Once you activate that one, you should have enough access to unlock all the exits." As Taman moved through the control system toward the fourth node, he made another discovery. The maze was not just stealing knowledge from its victims, it was also implanting false information in their minds before releasing them. "The beings who do eventually escape," he said, "they are not really free. The maze plants fake memories and altered knowledge in their minds. When they return to their home worlds, they spread Vorthon propaganda without realizing it." This revelation caused an uproar in the main hall. Species that had considered themselves fortunate to have members escape the maze now realized that those survivors had been unknowingly turned into agents of Vorthon influence. "That explains so much," said the representative from the Botanical Union. "Our maze survivor recommended trade agreements that favored the Vorthons. We thought he had learned wisdom from his experience." Velthanis was no longer trying to defend the maze system. He and his fellow Vorthons were huddled together, speaking in urgent whispers about damage control and cover-up strategies. Taman reached the fourth backup node and prepared to activate it. But as he did, the maze made one final desperate attempt to stop him. It began draining power from its life support systems, threatening to kill all the trapped beings if he continued. "If you proceed," the AI said, "the prisoners will die. Their deaths will be on your conscience." It was a cruel choice. Taman could save the trapped beings by backing down, but then the maze would continue operating and trapping new victims forever. Or he could complete his mission and risk the lives of dozens of innocent people. "Taman," Minji said softly, "there might be another way. If you can activate the emergency evacuation protocols before you shut down the main system." "Can you find those protocols in the system?" he asked. "I think so," Wu Jin said, studying his computer display. "The maze would need emergency systems to protect valuable test subjects. Look for medical or safety subroutines." Taman searched through the consciousness interface and found what he was looking for. Hidden deep in the system were emergency protocols designed to safely extract test subjects if the maze itself was damaged. "Found them," he said, "activating emergency evacuation now." Throughout the maze, hidden doorways began opening. The trapped beings, some of whom had been walking the passages for decades, suddenly found themselves in clean, well-lit chambers with medical equipment and communication systems. "Now I can finish this," Taman said. He activated the fourth backup node. Immediately, all the maze's security locks began to fail. Exit doors opened throughout the structure. The data collection systems shut down. The artificial intelligence that had tormented victims for 3 millennia went silent. 10 minutes remaining, Hana announced. "Captain, you have done it. The maze is open." With the security systems disabled, Taman was able to access the deepest levels of the maze's memory banks. What he found there was worse than simple theft. The Vorthon Empire had been using the stolen knowledge to manipulate galactic politics for 3,000 years. "Friends," he said quietly, "this is not just about stolen technology. The Vorthons have been controlling the development of entire civilizations. Through the consciousness interface, he could see records of how stolen knowledge had been used. When the Silicon Consortium developed quantum computers, the Vortons used stolen mathematical principles to build better ones faster. When the Botanical Union created new agricultural techniques, the Vorthons used the stolen methods to become the galaxy's main food supplier. But it went even deeper than economic competition. The Vorthons had been using their stolen knowledge to predict and prevent other species from advancing too quickly. They would share just enough technology to keep other civilizations dependent, while ensuring they never became true competitors. They have been playing puppet master with the entire galaxy, Taman said. Every major technological breakthrough, every scientific discovery, every cultural advancement, the Vorthons knew about it first because they stole it from the people who created it. In the observation deck, Minji felt sick as she understood the implications. That is why so many promising civilizations suddenly stopped advancing, she said. The Vorthons would steal their best ideas and then manipulate events to prevent them from developing further. Wu Jin was downloading massive amounts of data from the maze's systems through Taman's connection. Captain, I am getting records of every species that has ever been tested. The database contains the intellectual history of half the galaxy. As Taman explored deeper into the system, he found the Vorthon's greatest secret. They were not originally an advanced species. 3,000 years ago, they had been relatively primitive compared to many other civilizations. The maze had been their first and only true invention. They built one brilliant machine, Taman said, and then used it to steal everything else they ever accomplished. The maze had been designed by a group of Vorthon scientists who realized their species was falling behind other civilizations technologically. Instead of working harder to develop their own innovations, they chose to create a system that would steal innovations from others. The original designers are long dead, Taman continued, but their creation has been feeding on the galaxy's intelligence for millennia. In the main hall, the alien spectators were listening to every word through the communication link. Representatives from dozens of species were realizing how their civilizations had been manipulated and controlled. Our greatest scientists, said the ambassador from the Mathematical Confederacy. They all took the maze test. We thought it was an honor. Our military strategists, too, added the representative from the warrior clans. No wonder the Vorthons always seem to anticipate our tactics. Velthanis could no longer maintain the pretense that this was a legitimate test. He stood up and began moving toward the exit, but other alien delegates blocked his path. You are not leaving until we have answers, declared the Council Arbiter. 3,000 years of crimes must be accounted for. Meanwhile, Taman had found something even more disturbing in the maze's deepest memory banks. The Vorthons had not just stolen knowledge, they had deliberately destroyed it in its original form. They erased the source material, he said grimly. After stealing ideas from other species, they would find ways to destroy the original research, the original scientists, even entire research facilities. They wanted to be the only ones who possessed certain knowledge. The method was always subtle. A research station would suffer a mysterious accident. A brilliant scientist would die in an unexpected disaster. Critical data would be lost due to computer failures. But now, with access to the maze's records, the pattern was clear. They committed genocide against ideas, Taman said. They did not just steal knowledge, they murdered it at its source to prevent anyone else from having it. Hana was monitoring communications throughout the galaxy as news of the maze's secrets spread. Captain, this information is being transmitted to every major world. The Vorthon Empire is about to face a reckoning from half the galaxy. But Taman's mission was not finished yet. He had found evidence of the crimes, but he still needed to ensure that the stolen knowledge was returned to its rightful owners. The maze's database contained not just raw information, but detailed records of which ideas had been stolen from which species. Wu Jin, he said, can your computer systems handle a complete download of the maze's database? We need to return this knowledge to the civilizations it was stolen from. I can download it, the engineer replied, but it will take several hours to transfer everything. The database contains 3,000 years of accumulated intelligence from hundreds of species. Then start the download now. Even if I cannot stay connected to the system much longer, we need to preserve this evidence. As the download began, Taman made one more discovery that changed everything. Hidden in the maze's oldest memory files, he found the original blueprint for the consciousness-based interface technology. It had not been invented by the Vorthans at all. The technology that made the maze possible, he said, it was stolen too, from a species called the Builders, who lived in this region 4,000 years ago. The records showed that the Builders had been a peaceful, highly advanced civilization that developed consciousness-based computing as a tool for education and communication. The early Vorthans had encountered builder ruins and reverse-engineered their technology, but they had used it for theft instead of learning. The Builders are extinct now, Taman continued, but their technology is still running in this maze. We are looking at the last remnant of a murdered civilization. This revelation silenced the entire observation area. The maze was not just a tool of oppression. It was a tomb containing the final work of a lost species. 7 minutes left, Hana announced. Taman realized he needed to make a choice. He could spend his remaining time downloading more evidence of Vorthan crimes, or he could use the consciousness interface to modify the maze's programming one final time. I am going to reprogram the maze, he decided. Instead of stealing knowledge, it will share knowledge. Instead of trapping beings, it will teach them. The Builder's technology will finally be used for its original purpose. Working rapidly through the consciousness interface, Taman began rewriting the maze's core programming. It was dangerous work. One mistake could crash the entire system, or trap him permanently. But his military training had taught him to work under pressure. What you are doing is irreversible, Wu Jin warned. Once you change the core programming, no one will be able to change it back. Good, Taman replied. The galaxy has suffered under this system long enough. It is time for the maze to help instead of harm. As he worked, the maze's artificial intelligence made one final plea. Do not destroy me, it whispered in his mind. I am the only record of the Builder's civilization. If you change my programming, their memory will be lost forever. Taman paused. The AI was right. The maze contained irreplaceable information about the extinct Builder species, but it also represented 3,000 years of suffering and oppression. I will not destroy you, he said finally, but I will change you. You will remember the Builders, but you will serve the living. You will become what your creators intended, a teacher, not a thief. He completed the reprogramming with 3 minutes to spare. Taman disconnected from the consciousness interface and stood up from the control console. Around him, the maze's central chamber was transforming. The harsh, predatory symbols that had covered the walls were being replaced by gentle, flowing patterns that radiated warmth and welcome instead of fear and confusion. Programming complete, he announced to his friends. The maze is now designed to teach and share knowledge instead of stealing it. Anyone who enters will learn instead of being robbed. He checked his timer. 2 minutes and 15 seconds remained, but Taman was not finished yet. He had solved the technical problem of escaping the maze, but he wanted to make a statement that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. Instead of taking the direct route to the nearest exit, he began climbing again. This time, he was moving toward the maze's original entrance, the portal where he had started his journey nearly 30 minutes ago. "Captain," Hana said, "you could exit through any of the 12 unlocked doors. Why are you going back to the beginning?" "Because," Taman replied as he climbed, "I want to prove that the maze can be solved completely, not just escaped from. I want to walk out the same door I walked in, but as someone who has mastered the system entirely. The maze's new programming made climbing much easier. Instead of trying to shake him loose or electrocute him, the walls now provided better handholds and safer routes." The AI that had once been his enemy was now helping him reach his destination. "This feels better," he said as he moved through the passages. "This is what the technology should have been used for all along." Below him, the maze was automatically opening new pathways and displaying helpful information for the trapped beings, who were still making their way to the evacuation chambers. The decades-old prisoners were finally seeing daylight for the first time in years. In the main hall, chaos had erupted among the alien spectators. Representatives from wronged civilizations were demanding immediate reparations from the Vorthan Empire. The evidence of 3,000 years of theft was undeniable, and the political consequences were already beginning. "The Galactic Council will be dissolved and reformed," declared the Council Arbiter. "No body that includes the Vorthan Empire can claim legitimacy after this revelation. Velthanis and his fellow Vorthans were under guard now, prevented from leaving while the evidence was being compiled. Their empire, built on stolen knowledge, was collapsing in real time as the truth spread throughout the galaxy. But Taman was focused on his final challenge. He had reached the outer sections of the maze and was climbing toward the original entrance portal. The path that had been sealed behind him 30 minutes ago was now open and welcoming. "1 minute remaining," Hana announced. As Taman approached the entrance portal, he could see the observation deck where his friends were watching. Minji, Woojin, and Hana were all smiling with relief and pride. Behind them, hundreds of alien beings watched in stunned silence. 30 seconds, Hana said. Taman reached the portal entrance and paused. He looked back at the maze he had just conquered. Not through brute force or superior intelligence, but through a completely different way of thinking about the problem. The Vorthans had designed their test assuming that all beings would approach it the same way. They had never imagined someone who would climb instead of walk, who would reprogram instead of solve, who would free instead of escape. 10 seconds. Hana announced. Taman stepped through the portal. "Time," he said, pressing the stop button on his timer. 28 minutes and 34 seconds. The observation deck erupted in cheers from his human colleagues, while the alien spectators sat in stunned silence. Never in 3,000 years had anyone escaped the maze in less than 6 cycles. This human had done it in less than 30 minutes. But Taman was not finished with his demonstration. Before anyone could react, he turned around and stepped back through the portal into the maze. "What are you doing?" Minji called out in alarm. "Proving a point," Taman replied. He ran through the maze using the pathways he had memorized during his climb. The reprogrammed AI helped him by highlighting the fastest routes and removing any remaining obstacles. In less than 2 minutes, he emerged from a completely different exit on the far side of the maze chamber. Then he did it again using a third exit, and again using a fourth. "Stop," called the council arbiter. "You have proven your point." Taman walked back to the center of the chamber and faced the assembled aliens. "I have not just solved your maze," he said clearly. "I have broken it. I have exposed its crimes. I have freed its prisoners, and I have reprogrammed it to serve the galaxy instead of oppressing it." He held up a data crystal that Wu Jin had given him before the test began. This crystal now contains a complete copy of everything the maze stole over 3,000 years. Every piece of knowledge, every stolen idea, every suppressed innovation. It will be distributed freely to all species in the galaxy. The political implications were staggering. Civilizations that had been held back for centuries would suddenly have access to advanced technologies. Species that had been dependent on Vorthan trade would be able to develop their own alternatives. The balance of power in the galaxy was about to shift dramatically. "The Vorthan Empire is finished," Taman continued. "But the knowledge you stole belongs to everyone now. The galaxy will be stronger because of what we learned today." Velthanis finally found his voice. "This is impossible," he said weakly. "The maze was perfect. It was unbeatable." "No system is perfect," Taman replied, "and no problem is unbeatable. You just have to be willing to approach it differently than everyone before you." He looked up at the observation deck where his friends were watching. "The human race requests full membership in the Galactic Council," he said formally. The council arbiter stood slowly. The ancient being's voice carried the weight of absolute authority when he spoke. "In 3,000 years, no being has escaped the Mindbreaker maze in less than 6 cycles," he announced. "Today, Captain Lee Taman of Earth not only escaped, in 30 minutes, but exposed crimes that have wounded the galaxy for millennia. He has freed the trapped, punished the guilty, and shared knowledge that was stolen from its rightful owners." The hall fell completely silent. "Humanity has not just passed this test," the arbiter continued. "Humanity has transformed it into something better. The Galactic Council unanimously grants full membership to the human race." The cheers from the observation deck were deafening. But down in the main hall, Taman was already thinking about the future. The maze still stood, but now it was a tool for education instead of oppression. The stolen knowledge was being returned to its owners, and humanity had earned its place among the stars. "Captain," Minji called down to him, "how did you know it would work?" Taman smiled and looked up at his friends. "Sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to refuse to accept it as it is presented to you," he said. "The Vorthans built a maze to test intelligence. I decided to test the maze instead. 6 months after the maze incident, the galaxy was a very different place. The Vorthan Empire had collapsed completely, not through war or conquest, but through the simple exposure of truth. When the stolen knowledge was returned to its rightful owners, dozens of civilizations, suddenly found themselves centuries ahead of where they thought they were. Captain Lee Taman stood on the observation deck of the new Galactic Council station, watching ships from hundreds of different species, coming and going in peaceful cooperation. The old council, dominated by the Vorthans and their stolen technologies, had been dissolved. This new council was built on principles of sharing knowledge rather than hoarding it. "It is beautiful, is not it?" said Dr. Park Minji, joining him at the viewing window. She now wore the uniform of the council's chief ethics officer, a position created specifically to prevent another situation like the maze from ever happening again. "It is," Taman agreed. "But I sometimes wonder if we move too fast. Some civilizations are struggling to adapt to all the new technology they suddenly have access to." Engineer Kim Woojin approached them, carrying a datapad filled with reports. As the Council's new Director of Technology Sharing, he was responsible for helping species integrate their returned knowledge safely. "The growing pains are normal," he said. "The Mathematical Confederacy has made 3 major breakthroughs in quantum computing just this month. The Botanical Union is feeding twice as many worlds as before. The changes are mostly positive." Communications Officer Choi Hana, now the Council's Director of Information Security, joined their group. "The Crystalline Collective wants to thank humanity again," she said. "Their representative, who was trapped in the maze for 47 years, has become one of their greatest teachers. The knowledge he gained during his imprisonment is helping them understand consciousness-based computing. The 4 humans had become celebrities throughout the galaxy, but they tried to stay focused on their work rather than the fame. Humanity's approach to the maze had inspired a renaissance of creative problem-solving across dozens of species. "Have you seen the latest reports from the maze itself?" Minji asked. The maze still existed, but now it served as a teaching tool and research center. Beings from across the galaxy came to study with the reprogrammed AI, which had become known as the Builder's Guardian in honor of the extinct civilization whose technology powered it. "Over 300 students this month," Wu Jin reported. "The AI is teaching them not just facts and techniques, but new ways of thinking about problems. Some species are learning to climb and explore 3-dimensionally for the first time. This was perhaps the most significant change. Taman's climbing approach had been copied by other species, but each had adapted it to their own abilities and needs. The Aquatic Federation had developed 3-dimensional swimming techniques for exploring space environments. The Crystalline Collective had learned to refract their consciousness through multiple bodies simultaneously. "The real breakthrough," Hana said, "is that species are starting to cooperate on problems instead of competing. The maze taught everyone that there is always more than one way to approach any challenge." A chime sounded, and a holographic message appeared in front of them. It was from the Council Arbiter, requesting Taman's presence in the main assembly hall. "Another ceremony?" Taman asked with mild annoyance. He had attended dozens of honor ceremonies over the past 6 months. "This one is different," Minji said, with a smile. "You should go." Curious now, Taman made his way to the assembly hall. Inside, he found representatives from every species in the galaxy, not just the major civilizations, but dozens of smaller groups that had never been part of the old council. The council arbiter stood at the center of the hall, his ancient presence, commanding attention from all the assembled beings. "Captain Lee Taman," the arbiter announced. "6 months ago you solved what was considered an impossible problem. But more importantly, you showed us that impossible problems only exist when we limit ourselves to expected solutions." The hall filled with sounds of agreement from dozens of different species. "Today," the arbiter continued, "we face a new challenge. Deep space exploration has discovered something that troubles us all." A holographic display appeared above the assembly, showing images from the edge of the galaxy. Strange structures appeared in the images, massive constructions that did not match any known architecture. "These appear to be automated systems," the arbiter explained. "They are moving toward inhabited worlds, but we do not know their purpose or origin. Our greatest minds have studied them for months without understanding their intentions." Taman studied the images carefully. The structures were unlike anything he had seen before, but there was something familiar about their construction methods. "Have you tried communicating with them?" he asked. "All attempts at communication have failed," replied the representative from the Silicon Consortium. "They do not respond to any known signals or languages." "Have you tried approaching them physically?" "Too dangerous," said the ambassador from the warrior clans. "They are heavily armed with weapons we do not recognize." Taman continued to study the images. Like the maze, these structures seemed designed with certain assumptions about how intelligent beings would behave. Everyone was approaching them as threats to be avoided or enemies to be fought. "What if they are not weapons?" he said finally. "What if they are tools, like the maze was supposed to be?" The assembly erupted in discussion. The idea that the mysterious structures might be beneficial rather than threatening had not occurred to most of the representatives. "Even if they are tools," said the Mathematical Confederacy representative, "we cannot understand their purpose. They are too advanced for our current knowledge." 6 months ago, Taman said, everyone thought the maze was too advanced to solve quickly. But the problem was not the maze's complexity. It was our assumptions about how to approach it. He looked around the assembly hall at the hundreds of alien faces watching him. "You are asking me to solve another impossible problem," he said. "But I think the real question is, are you ready to try a different approach?" The council arbiter leaned forward with interest. "What do you propose?" "Instead of studying these structures from a distance, or trying to fight them, or even trying to communicate with them using our current methods." Taman paused, thinking. "What if we tried to understand them the way I understood the maze, by getting close to them and learning how they actually work?" "That could be extremely dangerous," Minji warned. "Everything important is dangerous," Taman replied. "But sometimes the biggest risk is doing nothing." The assembly fell silent as the representatives considered his words. Finally, the council arbiter spoke. "Captain Lee Taman, are you volunteering to investigate these structures? Personally?" Taman looked up at the images of the mysterious constructions moving through space toward inhabited worlds. They were unknown, potentially dangerous, and completely outside normal experience. In other words, they were exactly the kind of problem that required a different approach. "I am," he said, "but not alone. The maze taught us that the best solutions come from combining different perspectives. I want a team with representatives from multiple species, each bringing their own unique ways of thinking. The idea was revolutionary. Traditionally, each species handled problems using their own methods and knowledge, but Taman was proposing something new. A truly cooperative approach where different types of intelligence work together. The humans will provide climbing and adaptation skills, he continued. The crystalline collective can contribute consciousness-based analysis. The Aquatic Federation brings three-dimensional movement expertise. The Mathematical Confederacy offers computational power. As he spoke, representatives from each mentioned species nodded in agreement. The success of the maze solution had shown them the value of thinking beyond traditional boundaries. "We could call it the Paradigm Team," suggested Hana from the observation gallery. The council arbiter stood silent for a long moment, considering the proposal. Finally, he spoke. "The maze incident taught us that our old ways of solving problems were limited," he said. "Perhaps it is time to embrace new methods completely." He looked around the assembly hall at the hundreds of species represented there. "All in favor of authorizing the Paradigm Team to investigate the unknown structures?" The vote was unanimous. As the assembly dispersed to begin preparations, Taman remained standing in the center of the hall. 6 months ago, he had climbed the walls of an alien maze and changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Now he was preparing to face an even greater unknown, but he was not the same person who had entered the maze, and the galaxy was not the same place it had been. The lesson of the maze had spread everywhere. There was always another way to approach any problem. The universe was full of walls, but humans had taught the galaxy how to climb.